The old mansion stood tall, its stone walls whispering stories of my family's legacy. I'm Richard Hartley, 68, a man who built a fortune in shipping but never forgot his roots. My son, Ethan, was my pride, my only child. When he married Clara, I thought she was perfect for him. Kind, graceful, ambitious. So, when they struggled to start their life, I made a decision. I signed over Hartley Estate, our ancestral home worth millions, to Ethan. It was my gift to secure their future. But I never imagined it would become my prison. The hook, one phone call changed everything. They thought they could bury me in the servant quarters, but I wasn't done fighting. That day, I moved into a small cottage on the estate to give them space. Ethan hugged me, promising I'd always have a place in the main house. Clara smiled, but her eyes were cold. Weeks passed, and I noticed changes. My belongings were shifted to a dusty room in the servant quarters. It's temporary, Clara said, her voice sharp. Ethan avoided my gaze. I felt like a guest in my own home. Worse, Clara started hosting lavish parties, flaunting the estate as hers. My friends whispered about her arrogance, but I held my tongue. I loved Ethan. I trusted him. Then came the dinner. Clara invited me to the main house, but I was seated at a corner table, away from the family. Guests stared. Humiliation burned my chest. "This is your place now, Richard," Clara whispered, smirking. Ethan said nothing. That night, I lay awake, my heart heavy. I'd given everything, and they'd reduced me to nothing. But I wasn't broken. Not yet. Clara's control tightened. She redecorated the mansion, erasing my family's history. My mother's paintings, my father's library, gone. Replaced with gaudy chandeliers and modern art I didn't understand. Ethan, once my confidant, grew distant. "Clara's just modernizing," he'd mumble. I saw the guilt in his eyes, but he never stood up to her. I started eating alone in the servant quarters, my meals cold leftovers from their parties. My health was fading, arthritis made stairs a nightmare, but Clara refused to fix the cottage's leaking roof. "Budgets are tight," she said, wearing a diamond necklace I knew cost a fortune. One day, I found an old photo of Ethan as a boy, laughing in my arms. Tears stung my eyes. I'd raised him to be strong, but Clara had turned him into a shadow. I tried talking to him, but Clara interrupted, saying I was stressing him out. She banned me from the main house unless invited. My own home. Rage simmered, but I stayed calm. I'd learned patience in business. I'd built an empire from nothing. Clara didn't know who she was dealing with. That night, I overheard her on the phone, planning to sell part of the estate's land. Land my grandfather swore we'd never part with. I clenched my fists. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about our legacy. I needed a plan, not just to save my home, but to remind Ethan who he was. I wasn't a helpless old man. I'd fought bigger battles than Clara. In my shipping days, I outsmarted rivals who underestimated me. Now, I'd do it again. I started digging. Clara wasn't just redecorating, she was draining Ethan's accounts. I found receipts in the trash, luxury cars, private jets, vacations Ethan never mentioned. He thought they were investments, but I knew better. Clara was bleeding him dry. I reached out to Margaret, my old lawyer and friend. She was sharp, loyal, and knew the estate's legal details. Over tea in my cramped cottage, I told her everything. "Richard, the deed's in Ethan's name, but you have rights," she said. "We can fight this." I shook my head. A lawsuit would tear Ethan apart. I needed something smarter. Something personal. I remembered my old business partner, Victor, now a private investigator. I called him, my voice steady. "Find everything on Clara. I want her secrets." Victor didn't ask questions, he knew my tone meant business. Days later, he sent a file. Clara wasn't who she seemed. Her real name was Claire Donovan, a con artist with a trail of broken families. She'd married Ethan for the estate, not love. My blood boiled, but I stayed focused. This was my ammunition. Victor's file was gold. Clara had a history of fraud, but she'd covered her tracks well. She'd charmed her way into Ethan's life, knowing the estate was her jackpot. I needed Ethan to see her true colors without pushing him away. I started small, leaving hints. During a rare visit to the main house, I accidentally left a bank statement showing Clara's secret account. Ethan frowned but said nothing. I planted more seeds, mentions of her late-night calls, her business meetings with shady investors. Clara noticed. She confronted me in the servant quarters, her face twisted. "Stay out of my business, old man," she hissed. I smiled calmly. "This is my home, Clara. I'm not going anywhere." Her eyes narrowed, but I saw fear. She knew I was onto her. That night, I called Victor again. "Dig deeper. Find someone she's crossed." He found a man named Paul, a former business partner Clara had swindled. Paul was angry and willing to talk. I arranged a meeting at a cafe far from the estate. Paul's story matched Victor's file. Clara had ruined him, leaving him bankrupt. "She's a leech," he spat. I leaned forward. "Help me stop her." Paul agreed. My plan was forming: expose Clara publicly, but only after Ethan was ready to listen. Paul became my ally. He had contacts, people Clara had burned. We gathered evidence, emails, forged documents, even a recorded call where Clara bragged about owning the estate. I kept Ethan in the dark, knowing he'd defend her if I moved too soon. Instead, I invited him to the cottage for coffee. "Remember when we fixed that old boat together?" I asked, showing him the photo from part 2. His eyes softened. For a moment, he was my son again. But Clara was relentless. She announced a gala to showcase the estate, inviting the town's elite. I wasn't invited, of course. She wanted me invisible. That's when I saw my chance. The gala would be her stage, and her downfall. I told Paul and Victor to prepare. We'd crash her party, not with drama, but with truth. I also reached out to Sarah, Ethan's childhood friend and a journalist. She was skeptical but trusted me. "If you've got proof, I'll run the story," she said. I gave her Victor's file, keeping my name out of it. Sarah's article would hit after the gala, ensuring Clara's lies were exposed to the world. My heart raced. This was risky, but I was done being a shadow in my own home. The gala was extravagant. Lights glittered, music blared, and Clara played the perfect hostess in a gown that screamed money. I watched from the servant quarters, my stomach churning. Ethan stood beside her, smiling weakly. I slipped into the main house, unnoticed in my old suit. Victor and Paul were ready outside. Sarah was in the crowd, posing as a guest. Clara took the stage, announcing plans to develop the estate's land. Gasps filled the room. Everyone knew the land was sacred to my family. Ethan looked uneasy. That's when I made my move. I stepped forward, my voice steady. "This estate isn't yours to sell, Clara." The crowd hushed. She laughed, calling me senile, but I held up a document, proof of her secret account. "You've been stealing from my son." Ethan's face paled. Clara stammered, but Paul stepped in, revealing her past as Claire Donovan. Murmurs spread. Sarah recorded everything. Clara's charm crumbled as guests whispered. Ethan grabbed my arm, his voice shaking. "Dad, is this true?" I nodded. "Check the accounts, son." He left the room, phone in hand. Clara's eyes darted to the exit, but Victor blocked her. The trap was set. Ethan returned, his face ashen. He'd checked the accounts and found Clara's transfers. "How could you?" he whispered. Clara tried to spin a story, but the crowd wasn't buying it. Sarah's camera flashed, capturing Clara's panic. I stayed calm, letting the evidence speak. Paul shared his story, and another guest, a lawyer Clara had swindled, spoke up. The room turned against her. Clara fled the gala, but the damage was done. Ethan collapsed into a chair, tears in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Dad," he said. I hugged him, feeling the weight of years lift. "We'll fix this," I promised. The next day, Sarah's article hit, detailing Clara's crimes. The town buzzed. Clara vanished, but Victor tracked her to a hotel. She was arrested for fraud, her schemes exposed. Ethan and I sat in the main house, the air heavy. "I was blind," he admitted. "I didn't lecture, I'd won my son back." We started repairing the estate, restoring my mother's paintings, my father's library. The servant quarters were cleaned, but I moved back to my old room. It felt like home again. The estate began to heal, and so did Ethan. He divorced Clara, her lies too deep to forgive. We worked together, rebuilding what she'd torn apart. Margaret, my lawyer, ensured the estate's deed was protected, with clauses to prevent future betrayals. I taught Ethan about our family's history, stories Clara had erased. He listened, hungry to reconnect. The town rallied around us. Old friends visited, sharing memories of my parents. Sarah's article won awards, and she became a regular at the estate, helping us plan a community center on the land Clara wanted to sell. It was my way of giving back, ensuring the estate's legacy lived on. But I wasn't naive. Clara's arrest didn't erase her influence. Ethan struggled with guilt, and I worried he'd doubt himself forever. I hired a therapist to help him, and we grew closer, talking late into the night. The mansion, once a battleground, became our sanctuary again. Months later, the community center opened. The town cheered as Ethan cut the ribbon, his smile genuine. I stood in the crowd, proud. The estate was more than a house, it was a symbol of resilience. Ethan took over my old shipping business, proving he could stand on his own. I stepped back, content to watch him shine. Sarah became family, her laughter filling the halls. She and Ethan grew close, and I saw sparks of something new. I didn't push, I'd learned to let life unfold. The servant quarters were converted into guest rooms, a reminder of our past but not our future. I walked the estate's gardens, feeling my parents' presence. I'd honored their legacy. One evening, Ethan handed me a photo, us fixing that boat, framed. "This is home," he said. I nodded, my throat tight. We'd come full circle. The mansion stood tall, its walls no longer whispering pain, but hope. A year later, I got a call. Clara, out on bail, had the nerve to contact me, begging for forgiveness. I listened, her voice desperate. "I made mistakes, Richard," she said. I didn't yell or curse. I simply said, "You lost, Clara. We won." Then I hung up. That was the call that ended it all, the one that sealed her defeat and our victory. Ethan and I hosted a family reunion at the estate, the halls alive with laughter. Sarah was there, her hand in Ethan's. The community center thrived, and the estate's land remained untouched, a promise kept. I looked at my son, strong and whole, and knew I'd done right by him. The servant quarters were a distant memory, a lesson in resilience. As I stood on the balcony, watching the sunset, I felt peace. I'd given Ethan the estate, and though Clara tried to break us, we'd rebuilt stronger. One call had changed everything, not just to expose her, but to remind us who we were. The Hartley legacy lived on, unbreakable.